Welcome to MGoRadio 10.0. Is it 10.0? Is that correct? I don't know.
It's up to you, man. Like, you're the one who likes to do the zero thing because you're the computer engineer. Like, I could go for one, and then it could be like, because it's game one.
Look, I have a people, and I must represent the people. So we gotta zero index these babies. Let's go.
All right.
Michigan kicks off the 2024 season by watching the Rose Bowl again, but after that, they'll probably play Fresno State unless they decide to watch the national championship game. I'm Brian Cook.
I'm Seth Fisher, and watching the Rose Bowl again.
I'm Alex Drain.
This is MGoRadio. First off, we're going to talk about the upcoming team. Segment 4 will be about Fresno State if you want to skip to that because you've already read the preview. This will be us talking about our thoughts about our thoughts. It's going to be very meta. But we'll start off with late breaking news. The worst part of waiting until the week before the season is that you start posting stuff and then like consequential depth chart news gets posted that and you have to rapidly change all of your posts. I don't like it.
We had a couple. I don't remember anyone like this before. Do you?
Yeah, there have been shifts late, but so to sum up, there are a number of position battles that seemingly have been won that have been announced. And then there's ones that are still in question, but insiders think that they're leaning a particular way. And of course, by insiders, we usually mean Sam Webb, who tells us stuff. But Zeke Berry has won the nickel job. Jair Hill has won quarterback 2. Quentin Johnson, I don't think this one was in much doubt, but Quentin Johnson has won the second safety spot. Those are all announced by either Wink Martindale or Sharon Moore. On the offensive side of the ball, there have not been announcements, but we're talking to Sam today on WTK, and he thought that Dom Jadis was going to start at center and Evan Link was going to start at right tackle. And this has caused consternation amongst the faithful, I would say.
Where are we on the panic-o-meter about the Dom Jadis?
Not very high.
I don't think I'm that high about it because, he's a guy who switched over from defensive line, but he's been playing offense for 2 years now. I think this is his third year on offense. So, he's not really a position switch guy anymore. And, he was playing guard, and he's moved to center. And, I mean, usually you would think that a guy moving to center is something that would have to be more of a long-term project, but he was playing there in spring some. There was a quote I came across and didn't actually put in the piece because it was he's a guard, but he has been playing there kind of on and off this whole off season. And from what they were saying about Crippen and what they were saying about Raheem Anderson and their recruiting profiles and just kind of the shape of the way those guys have been playing, I have a feeling that the floor there is pretty high. And so does Jadis coming through imply that the floor is suddenly low and all the stuff we've heard about these guys for 3 years is not true? No, I don't think so. I think it might be a situation where we know Crippen was banged up at one point. We know Anderson was banged up at one point. And it's possible that Jadis was just the guy who was healthy throughout all of fall camp and they're all fairly close. And so they're going with the guy who seems to be in the best spot right now.
I don't think they do this if it's close. I mean, what I don't think is that there's a reasonable argument you could make that they thought they're going to go into a season with Crippen and go, oh no, and go in the portal and they get Olu. Thought they're going to go into a season with Crippen again and say, oh no, and get Nugent. And then just pretend that he's that good? Because like they were saying he was neck and neck with Nugent last year. I can't imagine that they would have the ruse for 4 years just to, that doesn't make any sense to me. Even if they're trying to keep him, they have Raheem Anderson. If they didn't think he could play, they would have gotten rid of him. They would have told him, hey man, go in the portal. You're not going to play here. But
no, I don't necessarily agree with that, because from a Michigan perspective, the opportunity cost of keeping a now redshirt junior center around in an era where scholarships essentially don't exist is zero. And
sure.
the ability to like plug and play veteran guys, like one of the nice things about this team is, they lost all 5 offensive linemen, but even if Link does start, 4 of the 5 guys who are going to be out there are in their 4th or 5th years in college. So it doesn't feel like Michigan is starting over. It feels like there's sort of a continuation, especially because we saw Gio Al-Hadi play a lot 2 years ago. We saw Miles Hinton play a fair bit last year. It's not like, they're panicking and they have to stick in a freshman Mason Cole or a freshman Cesar Ruiz. They finally kind of evolved past that.
Yeah. So here's my thing on this is just the I believe in the Crippen Anderson thing, but where was the Dom Jadis hype earlier in this year? Like that's the one thing that's kind of got me stuck a little bit, because in theory, I do believe in Crippen Anderson being good. If he's pulled past them, that's a good sign. But I was compiling all these insider articles, bits on offensive line, all this stuff through all fall camp to do fall football bits. There wasn't one mention of Dom Jadis. Not one mention.
No, that's not true, because he was supposed to be in a battle with Gio Al-Hadi. Okay. Remember, they came in and they're like, there's 2 spots on the line that are set, and that's Hinton and Preeb. Mm-hmm. And then it was El-Hadi who was like supposed to be in a battle with Jadis, and then Sharon Moore goes to Big Ten Media Days, and he says that like one of the guys who's really performing is El-Hadi, and that's when everybody was like, okay, that's not a real battle. But
so that's before fall camp, because Media Days was in July.
Yeah, but I think the point is
there was a point at which El-Hadi was not locked in as a starter.
Okay,
and that was because of Jadis. So that is a point in his favor, and for him to like not be able to beat El-Hadi and then kind of reemerge at center, that kind of sounds all right. Like I'm not thrilled by this development. I would have preferred if it was just Crippen or Anderson, because those guys are guys who didn't just play center in college. Both of them played center in high school.
Yep.
So that's kind of what I want, is I want the Cesar Ruiz who went to IMG, and that's what Crippen was. He was the center at IMG. So, I kind of feel like this isn't my preferred outcome, but it doesn't really alarm me that much. It is possible that Jadis just kind of like took a quantum leap. That happens. I just finished writing up the safeties, and I was talking about Quentin Johnson. So
right.
Sometimes guys just make a move, right? Like it does happen. And this kind of feels like a situation where that's a strong possibility.
I think what we're looking at is that you don't say it unless it's really happening. If Dom Jadis is really pushing for a starting spot, and you got Crippen and Anderson, and those guys have been battling for, and Crippen has expected this job for a long time now, and unless it is obvious, unless it is happening, there's no reason to talk about it, because then it feels like you're just undermining or just trying to get Crippen motivated or something. Once it's really happening is when you hear about it. So I think that it was probably, it's just not something they wanted to talk about, because we would have freaked out, and then it doesn't happen, and it's like, what gives? But if it's happening, then you have to talk about it, and now it's happening, so now they have to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the one that concerns me a little bit more is Link.
Yeah. Because
he's a redshirt freshman. He's not a guy who's been around for 4 years, and he's apparently going to be playing over, I think, a redshirt senior in Jeffrey Percy, and then a redshirt sophomore who went on a mission trip in Andrew Gentry. I don't know how many times I had to replace the word Zach with Andrew writing that post up. It was brutal.
I've done it in my head a gazillion times too. I mean, that story at least we understand, right? That obviously, if Gentry and Percy weren't seizing the job, and neither one of them was seizing the job in spring, and you get to fall camp and neither one of them is seizing the job, the redshirt freshmen always have that rise, right? Like you see it a little bit in spring maybe, but then like fall camp of a redshirt freshman is a lot of times when those guys start to pop. It tells me two things. It tells me Gentry and Percy probably are not protecting well on the edge. So they're like, we need to go somewhere else. And it tells me that Link tied them. Because that's all he had to do because he's the redshirt freshman. So if you want to see like how far this goes, you have that guy. And then, Gentry is a really good option if you're just for like an extra lineman, right? Like if you wanted to pick anyone on this offensive line to be your 6th OL, he seems like the guy. But if he can't pass protect, then you can't use him, and might as well see what you got with Link and see if you can get a 4-year starter out of him.
Yeah, and he did put on, I think, 21 pounds to get up to like 328, and that kind of addressed one of the major issues that was posited in his recruiting profile. The other thing about his recruiting profile is it's littered up and down with discussion about how advanced this guy is technically. And so that does kind of mitigate it a little bit for me, is this isn't a guy that they're just throwing in and hoping. This is a player who is very well coached at a very, where did he come from? I forget the school, but it's like a big time.
That was in Virginia, wasn't it?
Evan Link?
Yeah.
Gonzaga Prep in DC.
Yeah.
Okay,
so he's been coached, and this is a situation where I can see it. But again, it's just like the ceiling for Evan Link this year is lower than I thought the ceiling for Andrew Gentry, who came in as a nearly top 50 player, has been around, has been back for 2 years from his mission trip, and has that frame that had people projecting him as a potential NFL left tackle. Like, it just feels like Link is more likely to, well, apparently not more likely to make mistakes, but his error rate kind of tops out at a worse error rate than a hypothetical Andrew Gentry who just grabs the job and runs away with it. So, I'm not too concerned about the offensive line. I feel like, given that they lost all 5 starters, they're in a pretty good spot. But, my ideal outcome for the position battles in fall didn't transpire.
Yeah.
Miles Hinton has 1 year left just this year, right?
Yes, he's just this year.
We'll need another tackle next year. If Gentry's getting beaten out by Link now, are we down on the prospects of him starting next year?
I mean, maybe. There's this quote he gave this offseason where he was like, yeah, I came back from my mission trip 280 and it wasn't a good 280. So I think there's a world in which he still needs like another year to refine and get there. And, offensive linemen are often a little bit like defensive tackles, where it's like you just never want to give up on an offensive lineman.
Yeah.
Like Andrew Vistardis started for Michigan's Big Ten champion team in 2021. It was very good. And I don't think anyone would have seen that coming when he was a redshirt sophomore.
I was ready to give up on John Runyon after he played Notre Dame in 2018.
Yeah, I mean,
and he was the all Big Ten tackle that year. Yeah.
Well, I know. I actually just turned that into a verb when I was talking about Quentin Johnson. I said he underwent the finest Runyon since the original. So, yeah, it happens. Like guys come out of nowhere even after they've been put on the field. Like, so I do think, it does blunt my enthusiasm for Gentry's like trajectory. There's no question about it, but I don't think it's like where it's like, send him to a MAC school. No, you keep him around and see what you got. And that's how you get the kind of, assembly line that a Wisconsin had under Barry Alvarez. And that's what Michigan needs to be aiming for, right?
Yeah.
They want to be able to put in, 3rd year, 4th year, 5th year players when they have people depart.
Well, and there was absolutely no discussion of like a true freshman. I mean, we're not talking about a Elizio situation here where we just had bad start, guys that we knew had a low ceiling and then he beat them out. Like Gentry, we've been kind of hoping for a while, but if they had to go with Gentry this year, we would not have. I don't feel like we would have been like miserable about that. Like that's what we wanted to have.
Well, no.
Yeah,
and Elizio was a total panic move, right?
Yeah.
But this isn't necessarily a panic move. I mean, we saw Jeffrey Percy start against Rutgers 2 years ago. He wasn't great, but he wasn't Nolan Elizio, right? Like, and he's not worse than he was 2 years ago. You know, maybe he tops out as a guy who just doesn't have a very high ceiling, and they think maybe Link by the end of the year is going to be a better player, and so they want to play him. But the floor on any of these 5 spots on the offensive line doesn't feel that low. Now, you could get into the season, you could be like, I guess we were wrong about that, but you know, we've been doing this for a long time, and I'm more or less okay with the situation there.
Yeah, I also keep in mind for Link, it's a great. This year maybe not so great, but the list of offensive tackles who started playing as freshmen is a very good list.
And that's another possibility too, is that it's possible that Link just needed that extra 20 pounds, just needed to pop up and kind of address some of his deficiencies, and now he's going to be a Zach Zinner-ish player. The only problem with that is, you know, Zinner started making waves as soon as he arrived on campus, and we really didn't start hearing about Evan Link until like late spring practice, and early fall practice. So to me, that's a little bit of a shakier situation, but it should be fine. And to me, like, the real swing guy on the line is not Evan Link, it's Miles Hinton.
Yeah, but I mean, the best news all offseason as far as the offensive line is that Hinton grabbed that left tackle job and was like written in stone.
Yeah, but I mean, unless Link's not very good, and then it's like, oh, that was bad news. But you know, I feel the same way, and you know, I went over his tape from last year, and I went over the Maryland game, and I found what I thought was a real improvement in his balance. And I think the key quote from him this offseason was he puts on 20 pounds and he's like, now I've got that grown man strength. Like, no, you already had that. And you're like, I've watched you like pick up 270-pound people and just put them over there. You're good on strength. But then he said, I feel like I've finally found my balance. Mm-hmm. And if Miles Hinton plays balance, he's going to be an all Big Ten player. And you know, we've seen him just obliterate people, and then on the next snap, he'll fall over. If he can just come under control, he'll be great. And the thing about Hinton is, even last year when he was 20 pounds lighter, that guy was a house. So a lot of times what you see is guys who are undersized or don't have enough strength will come out unbalanced and they'll fall over. And the quintessential example of this is when they moved Ben Mason to defensive tackle. Mm-hmm. Like, he had no choice but to go Tasmanian Devil, and he wasn't very effective at it because he's just not the right size. And the thing about him is that he's like Max Bredesen, in that Max Bredesen is usually blocking back 7 players. Yeah. And he's bigger and he's stronger than the back 7 players. So he has the luxury of absorbing contact from them, uncoiling with his legs, and then moving them. And if Hinton can do that against a defensive end who's 70 pounds lighter than Hinton, I mean, he's going to move people. And I don't think that's under question. It's just like, how many -2s does he have this year? And I don't think anybody can answer that.
I mean, my hope for Hinton this year is that we never have to mention them not redshirting him last year again. But
right, because it's just like, this guy's going to the draft.
Right. Yeah. It's like, okay, I mean, they got what they could out of him.
I mean, the guy started against Maryland in a game that was a tight game. He was important in the Penn State game. He was important as a bonus OL down the stretch. Like, I don't think they could have redshirted him. They needed him, and they were aiming for a national title. So
yeah, I mean, they could have gotten 4 games at the end of the season and gotten a redshirt on him that way. It's starting him at the beginning of the season was what I was really referring to.
Well, you know, they started him at the beginning of the season because you see the potential there. Yeah. And if he can get there, then your chances of winning the whole thing go up a lot. I understand why they did it. Mm-hmm. It is a bit of a bummer because, like, you might get he might be a really good player next year if he's still in college, but that's not possible now. In any case, Hinton's a big swing guy. I don't really know if we have a lot to say about, you know, running back or wide receiver that we didn't say on the season preview podcast. I think those have been pretty static positions. Yes, agree.
Yeah. I got a couple more people who said Kendrick Bell has been coming on, but I imagine that's like Kendrick Bell is going to be available to help next year kind of thing, not he's going to be a major impact player this year. But
all right, so
don't count out Bells.
So we'll move on to quarterback, where it does still seem like it's Alex Orji's job, but Davis Warren has definitively passed Jack Tuttle, and some people are saying that he's pushing Alex Orji fairly significantly.
It's kind of the late breaking wins at the moment. I don't really know what to say because for a while there was really this divide between different paid sites, between those that were firmly in Orji's camp and those that were kind of chickening out a little bit in terms of toss up. Can't be wrong if you don't commit. Yeah. But then in the last few days, there's been stronger and stronger winds in Warren's direction. I think Orji maybe is still holding him off, but I honestly don't know who's going to get the first snap on Saturday night at this point.
Well, so we were talking to Sam, and he was talking about how Orji had thrown like 4 picks all fall practice, and then in one practice he threw 3, and he was looking about like to see how Orji would respond. So to me, if you are in the camp where you're like, it's probably Alex Orji, you're like, well, he responded well, and that's fine, and he's going to move passes, and it's been good. And if you're in the camp where it's neck and neck between Alex Orji and Davis Warren, you're like, well, he threw 3 picks. So I think both of these things are similar.
My theory here is that they don't want to give away any information for Texas because those are 2 very different quarterbacks to prepare for. And I think that they're going to probably play both of them at Fresno State. I wouldn't even be surprised if they start Davis Warren against Fresno State to like keep the mystery going, you know?
No, for me, like if it's close and you're going to play both of them, you're going to start Orji, because one of the things that we've heard very consistently coming out of the program is like this guy is a leader on par with a Sane Ristol or a JJ. And I think in that case, you want him out there first. I do think that Davis Warren is going to get a first half drive against Fresno State, and I think he should, because Alex Orji is going to be running the ball a lot, and you need your backup quarterback to have some live fire snaps in the event that Alex Orji is dinged or injured or can't go. Like, how useful was it for Michigan to have JJ McCarthy in their back pocket in 2021? I think it was extremely useful, and so I think that model where you're not just relying on the starter is going to be replicated. And
you
then
convert him to receiver right now.
No, and then as Alex mentioned, like that does kind of throw a wrench in what Texas is preparing for. If you can show them 2 different quarterbacks and be like, well, you got to prepare for both of these things, I think that's an advantage for Michigan.
We've been pretty pro Orji on this podcast or various MGO blog podcasts in general. Are we still firmly on the we want him to be the quarterback?
I mean, he's the one guy who has like an indisputable plus skill. And so for me, if you're going to be able to take advantage of that, I think that, I think I prefer Alex Orji because of his potential, because of his size, because of the fact that it makes the math on a run game that should be very good, very difficult. But I mean, really, it's just who's the better quarterback. And I'm not down on Davis Warren. Like when Warren has played in the spring game, he doesn't feel like a walk-on, right? He doesn't feel like Nick Sheridan. Feels like a scholarship quarterback. He feels like more of a scholarship quarterback than a couple of the scholarship quarterbacks that have been on the team the past few years.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
No, I think that just Orji works better in the concept of this offense. It's not a spread offense in the idea that you are trying to like play the numbers game all the time. You're going to use him to set the numbers, and then you want to have matchups. Like Mullings, you can put him on a guy, he's going to be a bad matchup. You can get Edwards into a bad matchup. You put Loveland outside, it's going to create like bad matchups, right? That's what this team is made out of. And when you add Orji, he's a bad matchup too, because now you putting linebackers, you moving at like who's going to be on him? Because if you leave him on a linebacker and then all of a sudden he runs around that guy, that's going to, that creates a whole different scenario as well. So I think that the way that they want to play offense is just move guys around, like, shift Samaj this way. And then the next shift is going to put Bredesen to the right. And you see how they react, because they're going to have to tell you what their coverage is, because they're either going to be in man, and then you can just pick on the guys in man, or they're going to be in zone, and then they're going to have a mismatch because you just switched Samaj Morgan and Max Bredesen around. And Orji's the guy who pays that off better because he's going to be one of those mismatches.
Yeah, and I mean, he just has to be able to throw the ball reasonably well.
Right.
In the preview, I was like, "Do you think it can be Hudson Card?" Because if his arm is like Hudson Card, then we're off to the races, baby. Because and the Hudson Card is 6.7 yards an attempt, 59 completion percentage. Like, can Orgy do that? Like, I feel like he probably can. And then what his legs give you, and also not just the fact that he's fast, but he's also 235 pounds. So you want to keep your short yardage percentage up. Well, he's the guy to do it, especially because you don't really have an inline tight end this year. So the most effective way to convert short yardage when you don't have the big uglies to add to your offensive line is to go light in the box and then have your 235-pound Tebow just run over a linebacker. So I feel like I want it to be Alex Orgy because I think the upside is really high. But if Davis Warren plays, I feel like he'll probably play pretty well.
Well, so you mentioned in the season preview sort of Stetson Bennett to Cade for Davis Warren. What, for the sake of argument, let's say Davis Warren is the starting quarterback this year, wins the job. What are we sort of thinking in terms of setting expectations and that kind of thing?
Well, I do think that he's more mobile than Cade.
Yeah.
Right. So we've seen him take the ball and run, and he looks approximately like JJ when he does that. Like maybe a half step slower than JJ, but he's a guy where you can pepper in quarterback run, 2, 3, 4 times a game, and it'll be effective. So, I think, kind of a McNamara plus. Like I think he would be a game manager. I think he'd be handing off a lot, especially because the wide receivers are not the strength of the team. Like you got one good one, and then you have a slot who might be KJ Hamler, but he has to prove that, and then you have question marks. And that's one other thing that I think does advocate for Orgy winning the job is that you have the personnel pretty much all over the field that kind of indicates that he might be better fit for it, because you have Colson Loveland, who's got a huge catching radius and can maybe bail out some throws. You have the slot receiver who can give you some relief from guys crowding the box by just throwing screens and playing horizontally. You have, Mullings and Edwards, who are like a super version of the West Virginia guys from Rich Rod's era, Owen Schmidt and Steve Slayton. So I figure, I just look at this personnel and I'm like, that's kind of the offense I think fits this personnel best. You'll have to see if they they're not going to run like a 1999 West Virginia offense, but they're going to run a modern version.
I've been saying Cam Newton. I mean, he's not Cam Newton, but that's the kind of offense you want. Will you have a lot of veer? Will you have a lot of pin and pull? Because that's going to bring those linemen back into play, right?
Well, and one thing that you can do with Orgy that you were less able to do with a Denard Robinson is you want him to go vertical, right?
Yeah.
Like Denard Robinson wanted to be in space, but you can run power with Alex Orgy, and no one can say that that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
So, it's going to be interesting, and I can't say either way that I'm confident in my prediction that Orgy's going to be a guy or Davis Warren's going to be a guy. We're going to see big X factors there. All right, let's take.
I just had one last point here.
Go ahead.
2022 Penn State, you'd make the quarterback's legs into a threat. One of the safeties has to check him, or somebody's got to check JJ. And now you got all this room for running backs. What's Michigan's best way of scoring in this offense? It's Donovan Edwards breaking loose. So you take a safety away from that and make it, bring everybody down to the box and make them play Alex Orgy as a running back. Well, Donovan Edwards just has, one fewer safeties that he has to get by.
Good point. We're going to take a break, come back, and flip and talk about the defense.
Since 2001, Underground Printing has been the Ann Arbor original. Starting from a West Quad dorm room and growing into the go-to source for custom apparel and Michigan gear. Whether you're gearing up for game day or creating custom design for your team or business, Underground Printing has you covered. With 3 convenience stores right on campus, getting your hands on high-quality Wolverine gear has never been easier. Visit Underground Printing today, in-store or online at shop.undergroundshirts.com, where Michigan pride meets top-notch service.
It's Nick Hopwood, CFP and founder of Peak Wealth Management. If you find yourself wondering if you're on the right track for retirement, reach out to us at peakwm.com. MGoBlog for a second opinion. You know, I've been sponsoring these guys for years. People keep telling me that my voice is pretty boring, and you've been fast-forwarding through my ads. Well, yeah, I'm the guy you trust for your retirement planning and investing. It's not like I'm Gus Johnson or anything. And I really like spreadsheets, okay? It's not like I just sit here and look at your finances and be like, Donovan Edwards, the pistol back.
McCarthy to throw it. McCarthy looking, throws deep, got a wide open receiver. Cornelius Johnson sprinting, touchdown Michigan. 75 yards. They said the kid couldn't throw a deep ball.
I'm going to play a bunch of clips like this all year, so now you can stop fast forwarding through my ads, okay?
Jake Butt here, guys, live down from the National Championship Convention Center down in Houston, and we got some big-time news for you guys, Michigan faithful. We need your help to keep our team. Last year, Champion Circle launched the One More Year Fund to support key players coming back, like Blake Corum, Trevor Keegan, and Zach Sinner, who elected to return to Michigan for one more year. Now we're launching the Those Who Stay NIL campaign. Our rivals are coming after many of our key players, trying to induce them to leave Michigan. It's time for the Michigan family to show our players how much we appreciate them and want them back in the maize and blue. To keep the momentum going, head over to thosewhostay.uofm.com. Again, that is thosewhostay.uofm.com to support. Go Blue.
In southeastern Michigan, the yearly cost for a nursing home averages
approximately $100,000.
It doesn't have to, though. Reed McCarthy founded Ann Arbor Elder Law after handling a tricky situation for his own family. Years of experience later, his boutique firm works with clients across southeast Michigan, dealing with Medicaid planning, long-term care, and tax, disability, and family law, not to mention family dynamics. If you have a family member who may need that level of care, or if you're ready to start your own estate plan, Reed can give you a plan for the future. Visit AnnArborElderLaw.com or call 734-945-9693. That's 734-945-9693.
Welcome back to MGoRadio 10.0. We now change positions, sides of the ball, and talk about the defense. There's really not a whole lot of drama on this side of the ball. I think everybody wanted Jair Hill to win CB2. He did. I think everybody assumed that Quentin Johnson's experience would have him win out at the other safety spot, which happened. And, you know, the fall camp developments that have been the most interesting have been people talking up Jayshawn Barham, who is apparently Devin Bush but big.
Yeah, Sam hit us with that today in the radio show, and your face was.
I was just like, I'm not having that. I'm sorry. Like, I hope Jayshawn Barham proves me wrong, but come on, man.
that is a lofty comparison. I mean, we have seen Mike Hart but fast in our lifetime, so it's possible.
It's possible
that Devin Bush but big comes along eventually, but
you know, I think, you know, the more important developments are, you know, TJ Guy seems like a solid rotational piece at one defensive end. We really don't have defensive tackle number 3 squared away because, you know, Wink Martindale was talking about how Benny's not all the way back yet. And then the nickel spot where Zeke Berry beats out Jaden McBurrows. Now, how do we feel about that one?
I mean,
I feel good. I liked Zeke Berry. When he was in his recruiting profile, I wrote that hello. This is when you kind of expect him to break out, right? Third year in the program. This should be his time.
Yeah, I mean, he was a recruit that the people who talk to the program were getting really excited about. Like Lorenz was saying, okay, this guy's, you know, someone that they're super excited about, and he is a very different kind of guy than Samerstill. He's more of a Peppers, like a smaller Peppers kind of player. So he just brings a lot of oomph, just has a ton of athleticism, speed out of his ears, and it's like they wanted to get him on the field so bad. It was obvious that the program wanted him at nickel this year because they went out and got all these safeties after they lost Rod Moore so they could keep Zeke Berry at nickel. And that tells me that they believe that that was a weapon that they wanted to have in this defense. They weren't ready to, and if they weren't going to let it go if they could. And Jaden McBurrows, I've liked Jaden McBurrows for a long time, but he's smaller. He has he has Saint.
Are you saying that small players can't play nickel?
He has Saint.
Are you underrating Mike Sainristil?
He Saint Ristil's only limitation without being Mikey Sainristil, right? So it doesn't matter if you're Mikey Sainristil because you're so valuable, but the physicality does matter, especially if you're going to be blitzing more. I know you get so mad when I bring that up, but it is kind of one of the things that was all over Zeke Berry's profile, and one of the reasons why they thought he was kind of Peppers-ish, right? Is like you can use him as a linebacker, and he's Devin Bush, but tiny. Like he has that just squirrely, and that's a skill, right? Being able to blitz and being able to kind of guess where quarterback's going, like that is.
I mean, you can just call him Khalil Hudson, right? That's a.
He's not that. But he's little. He's more. He's running back sized, and Khalil Hudson was definitely linebacker sized, especially by the end.
All right. Disagree, but we'll move on.
There's early Khalil Hudson, and then
no. I said we'll move on.
Okay. Who do you want to move on to? Because
you can continue talking about Zeke Berry.
Oh, I mean, he's not going to be a Sainristil. You're going to want to have him play man coverage more often. You're going to have a few more blitzes. You're going to change the shape of the defense a little bit to fit his skill set. But one of the guys they were comparing him to was also Dax Hill. He's not as fast as Dax Hill. Dax Hill was off the charts. But he's that kind of guy who could, if you wanted to move him to cornerback, he could certainly play it. He's just
he's not that far off of Dax Hill. Like Dax Hill was a 5-star and was at like another level from him athletically, but Berry I think was either just inside the top 100 or just outside of it. A guy who has the physical attributes to be a quintessential nickelback, and came through a player who had something like 300 snaps a year ago. Came in the Ohio State game. Jaden McBurrows played 22 snaps in the Ohio State game, and nothing bad happened to him. And so, like, if you're a Michigan secondary player and you got like something on your resume that's like played a third of an Ohio State game and did not get dunked on, that's a really good start. And for Berry to pretty definitively pass him, I feel is a good sign, because we have an on-field like 300 snaps from a guy who played fairly well last year. And I think that this is an unalloyed good. Like, I think Berry is just going to be a dude.
Well, I mean, you talk about metrics that we believe in. If one site was way higher on him as a recruit than the other sites, which one would you want it to be?
24/7.
24/7 had him almost 50th. He was 53rd overall. The other ones were in the 250s, and On3 was probably brand new at the time, so they had a late ranking. But
what would you have done if I said ESPN?
I would have said, well, I disagree, because but yeah, I mean, we've seen that a whole bunch of times where like ESPN ranks a guy and then forgets about him the rest of the cycle. And Zeke Berry was someone that the 247, the people who were re-ranking were moving up constantly. And that guy normally gets underrated, right? Like, normally if a guy's moving up, he doesn't move up fast enough. And I go back to that. We have his recruiting profile. We have, I don't know if he was injured last year. Like, the reason we're asking questions is how come Jaden McBurrows is playing and not Zeke Berry, right?
Well, no, I just think that McBurrows was older. Like, he had an extra year in the program, and it's completely understandable.
Yeah.
Like, often guys in year two, especially at a very complicated position, a very complicated defense, aren't quite there yet. And I think he has arrived, and he is there yet now. So
yeah. There's another theory too that McBurrows might be on the cornerback depth chart.
Right? I mean, it's possible. Like, one thing, the cornerback depth chart is now like the 2 6'2" ridiculously athletic guys, and then it's like, I don't know. I mean.
Right.
They bring in Amir Hall, who's basically Josh Wallace 2.0, and then they have Keyshawn Harris, who was decent in spurts early against bad teams, and isn't slow. So those are 2 good points. And then it's like, I'm not really sure what else is there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lamar Morgan mentioned Jaden McBurrows in the cornerback 4 conversation when he met with the media. So that's a very legitimate idea. And I mean, honestly, is there an argument against using him as cornerback 4? Is there an argument for Keyshawn Harris over Jaden McBurrows in that situation?
Well, I mean, I guess the question is like, don't you want Jaden McBurrows to be taking snaps at nickel even with Zeke Berry in the picture? Like we saw all this rotation last year. Like I want 2 guys who I'm fairly confident can play nickel because that's a hugely important position. And I feel like Michigan does have a guy in Amir Hall who is going to rotate in and is probably going to play fairly decently. Guy was an FCS All-American last year. Maybe he's not as physically gifted as these guys, but he has 2,000 college snaps. Like I'm less concerned about what happens if one of the starting cornerbacks goes out than what happens if Zeke Berry goes out, if Jaden McBurrows is on the outside.
Yeah, that's a fair argument. It doesn't seem like Ricky Johnson is happening at outside
Not
corner.
this year.
Yeah. From
my assessment of him, I mean, he seems to be a good guy. Like they made him like a coach on the sideline, and he wants to go into coaching. But he also just there was no development there. He's like Miles Hinton, the cornerback.
Well, I mean, so I went over a lot of your transfer portal scouting in the course of doing my previews. You did an excellent job, by the way. And like, I've never seen you be less enthusiastic about you were like, I don't see it.
I mean, there's talent there. He can move. It's just he's a big hitter. Like I think that he was a good story. He's another captain that they wanted to, those kinds of guys are always going to be someone they'll take at Michigan. Even if he's a Tuttle, right? He's still going to be a take for Michigan because that's the kind of players they'd like to have in the room. And you could get something out of him. I just don't think they're going to get anything out of him this year.
Well, when Martindale brought him up, it was like, yeah, he's a real physical tackler and he's got to work on some other stuff. It's like, all right. If I heard that about a linebacker, I'd be like, all right, maybe he was good. Like you hear about a cornerback, you're like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think he's in the picture. It does feel like Wesley Walker is going to be a frequent participant. Guys played again over 2,000 snaps. This time at a Power 5 level at Wake in Tennessee. Graded out fairly well his last 2 years at Tennessee.
Georgia Tech, by the way, I think.
I'm sorry, Georgia Tech. Yeah. It's hard to tell them apart sometimes.
One just beat Florida State. The other one's not.
I mean, it's wild that Michigan was able to import this guy who's been an SEC starter for the last 2 seasons with the promise that, you'll get some snaps. And then he comes in and his quotes about Michigan are great because he's like, there's no hooting and hollering. It's no BS. It's just ball and how to get better at ball. And I love that. I'm like, I love you, man. You're just confirming all my priors.
I mean, how fun is it going to be to recruit against Tennessee from now on? Like you put that quote up in the board and be like, here's the guy who can compare the two, right?
Lamar Morgan's going to get a shirt with the whole quote on it just to visit recruits with.
We'll make it for him, man. Lamar, give me a call, man. I'll hook you up.
I'll call Rishi.
Call Rishi, hook you up. Yeah.
Speaking of Rishi, we want to thank Under On Pretty for starting this and making it all possible. Stop by and pick up some gear. Check them out at UGP Michigan Apparel or check out our selection of shirts at the MGoBlogstore.com. Let's not forget our associate sponsors, Peak Wealth Management, Matt Demarest, Realtor and Lender, Human Element, Ann Arbor Elder Law, Michigan Law Grad, Venue by 4M, Winewood Organics, Sharon's Heating and Air Conditioning, Champion Circle, Autograph, Fandom Rewarded, the app that rewards you for reading MGO blog and listening to our podcast, and Signal Wire, where we are recording this. That was a good one. That was a little late.
I think that was our. I would say that was our second best segue ever. Probably our second latest ad read ever too. Do you remember the
nothing
first?
Nothing will ever top the end of the Farewell Harbaugh podcast, where it was the last thing on it.
Oh yeah. No, the best one was when you'd forgotten to do it for 3 segments, and then we have Carl Grapentine doing the 4th segment, and I have him read it.
Oh yeah,
that one was.
Well, we should just do that all the time.
We've had different sponsors since then. Yeah.
Focus up. So it looks like the defense is locked and loaded. Like what is your concern if you have a concern?
got to be injury, right? I mean, just the.
Okay, but I guess injury where?
Bill Johnson with probably the biggest drop from starter to the next. I mean, Mason Graham, but
Yeah,
I don't
Mason
even want to
Graham.
talk that to like in existence. That's the thing I want to talk about on defense, by the way. That no one has had a better sophomore year that I could find. I was pouring through what I did is I started looking up first round and top 5 defensive tackles and seeing what their sophomore year looked like, and I could not find a comp to Mason Graham. There were
Not even Sue.
Sue was ridiculous as a junior. I think he predates PFF, so I was just like trying to look at the. I did go back and look at Sue. I looked at like the comments, like he was not a Heisman candidate after sophomore year. Mason Graham is just playing on another level. I looked the UFR scores that he got last year versus some of the best players that we've ever had. And it was like Devin Bush and Aiden Hutchinson and Chase Winovich in 2018. So like it was comparable to the last year that we got of some of our favorite defensive stars, and completely incomparable to anything else. Even Aiden Hutchinson wasn't close to him as far as true sophomore years. And that sophomore year for Aiden Hutchinson, that was pretty good. That was 2019, right? So, I mean, if he can take a step forward, and usually, that sophomore to junior step, I'm just trying to imagine what that is. Like, where can you go from here?
Mason Graham?
Yeah.
Nowhere. Like, he would have been a top 5 pick in this draft if he was eligible.
Right.
Like, he can do some things incrementally better. He can get stronger, but like, I mean, I'm not expecting Mason Graham to play better. I mean, if he does play better, that is Sue, right? There's nowhere to go except Ndamukong Suh.
I mean, but that's the thing with him. Every time I try to, tap the brakes at all, he just blows you out of, he every time that you and I have been like, okay, I'm not going to compare him to Aiden Hutchinson. Well, guess what? His career path has been so far equal to Aiden Hutchinson. I was like, he's not Rashawn Gary. He is Rashawn Gary. Like, he's
better than Rashawn Gary.
Yeah.
Like, Rashawn Gary didn't really come into his own until he was in the NFL.
I'm not
like he was a good player at Michigan, but he wasn't like a game in, game out wrecker.
I was using Rashawn Gary as a metaphor. I'm sorry. He's not the number 1 overall player in the when I said he should not be the number 1 overall player in this class, he should have been. He should have been the number 1 player in his class.
I think an underrated spot for injury is the position I wrote up, which is linebacker. I like Jimmy Rolder, but he missed basically all of last year with injury. He only played on defense in 3 games with a very limited snap count, and his entrance against Ohio State was disastrous in 2 snaps. So again, I like him. I believe that he can make that jump, but it would be, given the stated production to this point, a pretty substantial drop-off if a starter gets injured there. And beyond Jimmy Rolder, it gets even hairier in terms of guys we've seen. So that's just a spot to get a little bit just on the radar in terms of an injury concern.
Yeah, I agree with that. Because, I mean, the number 4 name there is Jaden Hood, right?
Yeah.
Who we have not seen basically at all.
Yeah, you get scatters. You got a lot of snaps from him in like garbage time where he's actually pretty decent. So I would not be like, I would not be that scared about Jaden Hood, but it would be a big drop off if Jason Barham is what Sam Webb says he is to Jaden Hood.
Well, but we're talking about a team that rotated 9 defensive linemen, 4 safeties. Like, if there was a guy who they thought was like, all right, they could put him in there for a while because the rest of the defense was so good that, like, I mean, how good was Josh Wallace last year? Like, Josh Wallace got an 87 from Pro Football Focus and didn't get drafted. So, like, this was a situation where you can put in some guys who are maybe a little bit behind the other guys, and it's not going to matter that much. And I would have expected, like, if they thought Hood was, going to be able to play, that they would have given him some snaps in meaningful portions of the game, because the only one they were rotating in the whole year was Hausman, and then they wanted to rotate in Rolder, right?
Mm-hmm.
They put him in the Ohio State game because they believe in his talent. Now, he was not ready for that because he'd been injured the whole season. my thing is like if they thought Hood could really play, we would have seen him a little bit last year, right?
Yeah,
You
that's
certainly think so, yeah.
yeah, that's fair. I did notice like as soon as they got to backup hour, Hood would come in. So they did get a lot of it. Like he was the Tuttle of the defense last year. Like okay, now it's time to pull the starters. Let's pull let's pull Colson or something and put him in. And I part of that has to be that they just wanted to get Houseman his snaps because he just transferred to your school and he's not starting, and they wanted to get Rolder up to speed because I thought they might have to use Rolder.
Well, so what I'm saying,
week.
Seth.
Yeah.
What I'm saying, Seth, is that Rolder was out most of the year with injury, right?
Yeah.
So they couldn't get him up to speed, and instead of rotating in Houseman and Hood, they just rotated in Houseman.
And I don't have an answer for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of not real thrilled about the linebacker depth. So I think that's a good call, Alex. Any other fresh takes that we haven't spouted on a podcast recently?
I think one other thing that should be mentioned is we've talked about Wink a decent amount, but there's also a lot of new positional coaches here. And so like I wrote in the linebacker preview about Brian Jean-Marie because the previous year Seth was writing about Chris Partridge coming back. So linebacker's been a bit of a revolving door, but we got a new defensive line coach, new DBs coach. Do we have any takes on what that could affect? I mean, that feels like a variable that hasn't really been considered by us much. And
it's really hard to like project these things, but it feels like, they pulled Lamar Morgan, who is a defensive coordinator, to be a position coach. That feels like a pretty good pull. I got a problem with Lamar Morgan, though. His press conference quotes are so vague that they are unquotable. Like they'll ask him about a guy, and he's just like, well, he's just this guy, and I'm like, no, I need something I can put in the story. Like Sharon's good about this. Like he's like, he's pretty fast and he's making plays. I'm like, I it's not a whole lot, but I can put it in there. And then Lamar Morgan is just like talking like about the philosophy of coaching football players a lot of the time, and I'm like, all right,
he's a Zen. I met that dude at the golf outing. I got to like talk to him for a bit. He's just like a very Zen kind of guy.
I believe that.
Yeah,
I believe that.
That's who he is. The one I'm kind of excited about because he's a name that I mentioned a couple times before he was on Michigan's radar, and that's Esposito. Because we were watching Western Michigan's defensive linemen, and like every year we'd be like, "Oh, that guy's good. Oh, where's Western Michigan getting these guys?"
Oh yeah, and then they'd like transfer to Florida State, and we're like, "Can we get one of them, maybe?" Just
yeah. And
one transferred to Indiana last year,
and he was good.
Yeah,
he was their best player on defense.
Yeah, so I mean, Esposito was finding those guys, and Esposito was coaching those guys up, and we had plenty of defensive line coaches here, so I wasn't advocating, hey, go get him, but I was kind of worried that a Minnesota or something would pick him up, and that's seems to be a really good hire. It seems like he didn't lose track with the recruits they had coming in, and the players seemed to all respond to him pretty well. So if you had to like pick somebody, I'd rather it be somebody that we've actually noticed is a good coach because we've played some of his players before.
Yeah, no, I was generally encouraged by the hiring process, especially because before they went to Lamar Morgan, they almost picked off like a rising star for the Texans, who seemed like a fantastic idea. So just like it felt like that Sharon Moore was a very attractive person to work for.
Well, he took Tony Alford right out of Ohio State.
Yeah, like the way that he hired his coaches, like people want to play for this guy, people want to coach for this guy. All right, we're gonna take a break. Come back with some more general takes.
Hey, it's Nick Hopwood, certified financial planner and founder of peakwm.com/mgoblog. If you're wondering where you stand relative to your retirement goals, keep us in mind. Can we help you retire with peak confidence? Yes. Can they catch him?
No! Donovan Edwards again, 85 yards!
Winewood Organics is Ann Arbor's only cannabis microbusiness. It's a place where plants are grown in living soil, where nearly every product is made, mixed, trimmed, and packed by hand, where first-time customers save 25% on everything from old-school hash to live resin carts. You can find them just west of downtown or at winewoodorganics.com. Winewood Organics, a place where the weed is better.
What's up, Wolverine fans? Are you a business owner, marketing director, or IT lead who wants to take your online store to the next level? I'm Kevin with Human Element, an e-commerce development and marketing agency right here in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and a longtime support partner of MGoBlog. We started Human Element 20 years ago to build sites that turn customers into fans every single time. In that time, we haven't forgotten our roots, working with classic American brands, Michigan startups, and true innovators in manufacturing, industrial supplies, consumer products, and more. We've seen it all, whether it's moving site platforms, starting a new brand, managing ad budgets, or just keeping the wheels spinning with maintenance and hosting for custom websites and all the major platforms like Shopify, BigCommerce, and Adobe. We're the kind of agency that puts in the work to understand exactly who our clients are to get projects through the goalpost every single time. If that sounds like what you're looking for, let's talk. Visit human-element.com/MGO to schedule a call with us and work together. That's human-element.com/MGO.
Maize and Blue Nation, it's Tom Brady. I founded Autograph with one mission in mind: change the fan experience for the better. That's why I'm excited to announce the official launch of the Autograph app, the app that gives die-hard Wolverine fans like you a one-stop shop for your Michigan fandom. Autograph has all the best Michigan content in one place and rewards you for all the things you're already doing as a fan, like listening to this podcast. It's time to feed your fandom with the Autograph app. Let's go and go blue.
Thank you to Cutworms for the interstitial music on MGoRadio 10.0. Now we sort of move on to a more general take. Have you guys changed your opinion about what you think Michigan season is going to look like over the past 2-3 weeks?
I might be incrementing up one win because, I mean, I only was doing the tackles and then I was reading the rest of the stuff you guys are doing. But, you know, I'm a big believer that if you have the best player in college football, that you get a little extra. And I think that we have been not properly appreciating what a difference these tackles are going to make. And last year, Texas had the best two tackles in the country, and they made the playoff on the back of those guys. And that it gives this team a much higher ceiling than think people realize. If you want to have any position in football, it's quarterback. But if it was anything else, it's two defensive tackles, and these guys are tracking towards being 2 top 5 draft picks.
Yes, for me, I pretty much in the same camp I had been previously. I'm not as scared of Texas, I guess, as I am Ohio State and Oregon. That was a team I came away a little bit more down on after doing the enemy ranked. I hate my optimism for USC's defensive depth chart based on the transfer portals acquisitions they got, but I still think this should be a good team. There's uncertainty. We need to see how it shakes out. The two things I had thinking about the schedule that we didn't get on to the MGO podcast, the third episode. Question number one, this is for Brian in particular. The last several years, you were unhappy with Michigan's schedule. You were not a fan of the non-conference schedule. Not a fan of how many boring games there were. Are you excited about this schedule?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it is a complete sea change, and if it was still a 14 playoff, I'd be looking at the schedule and be like, you might have scheduled yourself out of a playoff bid, but I think now it's like, you win one of those big 3 games and you get to 10-2, you're in, and so I think it's going to shift more towards a model like college basketball, where you have to play some real non-conference games in college basketball. And that might not always be the case because you only have 3 at-bats in college football. But, I feel like, week 2, Texas is going to come to town, and that's going to be like, people are going to be hyped for that game, and it's going to be totally different than playing, I don't know, Delaware State or whoever, UConn, like most of last season was just like, can we get this over with? Can we get to Penn State without anyone getting hurt? And I don't like it was boring.
It's definitely got a different feel to it. And my other point is, where does this Fresno State game rank on like most intriguing early season games in recent memory to, I don't know, last 10 years? Because I think it's really high for me. I mean, the quarterback stuff, the offensive line stuff, like I'm really excited about this opener in ways I haven't been in recent years, just because there's actually interesting things. We had these same characters last few years, which was great because they were great players, but now there's legitimately interesting stuff going on.
Well, and Fresno was a fairly good team last year. You mentioned that they lost a lot, though, right?
A decent amount. We'll get to that in the next segment, but it's I'm excited for Saturday.
Yeah, and I do feel like, the 12-team playoff lets you take swings at more interesting games, because if you're playoff worthy, you should have the resume by the end of the season instead of like having one bad Saturday, and you just want to minimize your chances of having a bad Saturday.
The only thing that I would seriously, there's two complaints I have about scheduling. First of all, it's not Michigan scheduling; it's everybody else's. There's just a lot of chaff out there, and there's a lot of chaff that have made it into the power conferences, and they feel like the existence of Rutgers and Indiana, with the kind of ways that we're playing these games, and the fact that they're going to schedule as many Michigan USC games as they can, I don't think that the current model is going to last very long. I think that the Michigans and Ohio States are going to get sick of playing the Penn States and USCs and Washingtons all the time. And, they've been talking about Rutgers getting into the playoff. And the entire reason for that is their schedule is just nothing. And the reason for that is nobody wants to play Rutgers. So what are we even doing here? Why do we have a second tier of these conferences? So I think you're right, Brian. I think that playing good teams is interesting and it makes it a good season. I would like other teams to have similar seasons, so it's not like we're going up 3 loss teams going against a 1-loss team at the end of the year.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right, and that's the reason that during the season preview podcast I said that the only way to make this work is to do divisions. Now, the division should not be permanent. What you do is you swap teams around so that you get to roll through everybody on the schedule eventually, but it is going to be a situation where I think you might see at the end of the year that the reason Team X and Team Y are in the Big Ten championship game is because they didn't play Michigan, and Michigan had to play a bunch of tough schools, or USC or whoever. I'm not just saying that this is just a Michigan problem, but the possibility that the schedule is overly determining who the champion is really out there, and that's not good situation to be in. All right, let's take one more break, come back, and get into the Fresno State Bulldogs.
The only thing we can be sure of about the future is that it will be absolutely fantastic. I'm thinking of the incredible breakthrough made possible by developments in communications.
Arthur C. Clarke's 1964 vision is now reality with SignalWire, a cloud platform that enables developers to build the applications that will reshape the future of communications.
These things will make possible a world in which we can be in instant contact with each other wherever we may be.
You can add cutting-edge, real-time video and audio to any product, website, or application with APIs and SDKs for developers of all skill sets. SignalWire is optimized for high-quality and low-latency communication functionality for video, voice, and text messaging capabilities.
Almost any skill could be made independent of distance. Men will no longer commute. They will communicate.
See for yourself at signalwire.com. Use code 2021 and receive $25 in developer credit. Go to signalwire.com.
SignalWire Communications OGs, original geeks of programmable communication.
Hi, I'm Gablog. It's Pete with Sharon's Heating and Air Conditioning. Warmer weather is finally on the way, and just like spring practice, it's time to prep your air conditioner for the upcoming season. Because when it's 90 degrees outside, the last thing you want is your system to fail you when you need it most, like an Ohio State defensive line. So call us today at 734-238-3698 or visit us online at sharonsheating.com to schedule an AC tune-up or a free estimate for replacement.
1 and 2 and...
If you find yourself on the wrong side of the law, you want a Michigan man in the huddle. Call criminal law attorney and former prosecutor Jonathan Paul at 248-924-9458 or visit his website at michiganlawgrad.com. Sean is a proud graduate of the University of Michigan Ross School of Business and Michigan Law School. He looks forward to showing you the Michigan difference.
Hey, fellow Michigan fans, this is Matt Demarest, Realtor and Lender. For a decade now, you've heard me on the podcast talk about mortgages, and I've helped hundreds of fellow Michigan fans in that capacity, including Brian and Seth. But many of you don't know I'm a real estate broker as well. I promise to make buying, selling, or financing homes simple and cost-effective anywhere in the state of Michigan. Whether you're upsizing, downsizing, buying a vacation home, or building a real estate investment portfolio, send me a text or give me a call. It's never too early to make a plan, and the call is always free. My number is 734-882-8194. Again, 734-882-8194. Or you can find me online at realtorandlender.com. That's realtorandlender.com. Whether you want to buy, sell, or finance a home, or even all three, I promise to provide the experience so many of you have come to expect over the years. And as always, thank you, and go blue. NMLS 1011726, Equal Housing Lender.
Welcome back to MGoRadio 10.0, and now is the time on the show when we talk about Sprockets, by which we mean Fresno State. Alex, let's talk about the Fresno State offense. What have they coming back? What have they lost? What is your projection?
This looks like an okay offense. It's definitely more of a passing offense. They throw in the upper echelon in terms of passing attempts per game. So secondary should get tested a little bit. Get to see some Zeke Berry and Jair Hill moments. They return starting quarterback Mikey Keene. He was at UCF previously. He started for them in 2021 when Dylan Gabriel got injured. So that's a fun little subplot there. Lost his job in 22, transferred to Fresno last season, 24 touchdowns to 10 interceptions, 67% completion at about 7 yards an attempt. He throws it pretty quickly, pretty accurate, decent decision maker, not mobile really in any particular way, but one of the better Mountain West quarterbacks, which, given what we've seen in past seasons on our schedule, is a welcome surprise to see a somewhat functional quarterback. They return a couple running backs, including Malik Sherrod, who ran for almost 1,000 yards last season. Their wide receivers, like the running backs, a lot of smaller, fast guys. That's kind of how they set up. They have two returning wide receivers who I wasn't too big on, but they add two FCS All-Americans via the transfer portal. So we'll see what that looks like. Tight end, I'm not super high on. The big question here is the offensive line and how that matches up with Michigan's defensive front, obviously. Probably their best lineman, Jacob Spalmer, is the left tackle. He's injured. He tore his ACL late last season. Probably going to come back at some point this season, but that's the benefit of playing them week one. So they've kind of got these big question marks at left tackle and right guard. They have three returning starters otherwise. They just didn't get a lot of push up front last season running the ball. So I think they're going to try to throw. It'll probably be like some of the non-conference games we've seen in the past where they're trying to get the ball out quick because that's a function of their offense in particular. Get it in the hands of these speedier playmakers and see what happens.
Yeah. So Jeff Tedford retired after the season, and their hire was an internal hire. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe it's still an interim head coach.
Okay.
Name is Tim Skipper. He was the interim coach for the bowl game.
So we don't really expect like a philosophy change here. It'll just be like more of the same.
That's my guess. I was reading in some of the preparation for this that this is the second time Tedford has stepped away. He did that with health, I believe, back in 2019. And some of the beat writers kind of have seen that the program rises and falls with Tedford's health. So there's definitely some fear with that when he is healthy and coaching full time, they're really a quite good team. They're usually a 9-10 win team. But last time he stepped away, things went downhill pretty quickly. So I think this time, at least, they should be more prepared, given the nature of his health, whatever the situation is. But that's definitely something to monitor.
That was what Tedford was like at Cal as well. Yeah.
Well, I mean, he's a guy who's coordinated very good passing offenses wherever he's been, and that, as you mentioned, is a contrast from what Michigan did all of last year. Well, not all of last year, but early last year, where we were 8 games into the season, and people were like, "Is Josh Wallace any good?" I don't know.
Yeah,
Because all of the quarterbacks were terrible. I remember we played Purdue, and I was just like, "Thank you, Purdue. You're actually trying to run offense."
Yes,
I appreciate that.
Well, here's the thing about this team. I mean, Mikey Keene, he mentioned, he's the kind of Cade McNamara kind of quarterback, but he's 5'11", 198, and he's one of the larger guys in the backfield for this team. Their entire offensive line is tiny. He mentioned Jacob Spomer's out. That's their best lineman. So the rest of the guys, Osmer Valdez is 6'1". They have a couple guys who are under 300 pounds, and I mentioned the defensive tackles, right? So it's going to be they're going to have to get the ball out quick is pretty much all there is to it. And I don't think they can throw the ball downfield against Michigan. I don't think they're going to have to last in the pocket long enough. And I don't know if we're going to learn that much against our backup defensive tackles because Trey Pierce is larger than anybody who's on their offensive line.
Well, you can still tell some things. Like, last year, I think it was against Michigan State, like TJ Guy dipped around the edge, and I was like, oh.
Yes.
So I think there are definitely things that you can tell. And I will be very interested to see Guy in particular, see what Jayshawn Barham's able to do. Is he bigger than one of their offensive linemen? Possibly.
Taller than a couple of them, yes. So,
all right, other side of the ball, Alex.
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty interesting. Obviously, Michigan's offense will be the focus of this game. In particular, if we're a little questionable about our tackles, and obviously Evan Link maybe at right tackle, the pass rush for this team looks interesting. Devo Bridges is the returning edge, second team All Mountain West last season, and he is being paired with a very interesting player, Corey Foreman, a transfer from USC, a former 5-star that transferred. He had kind of some good numbers in PFF, and then he fell out of favor with the Trojan coaching staff last season. Now he's transferring down to Fresno State. They're really, really excited about him. Obviously, a caliber of athlete that they don't get a lot of at Fresno.
But okay, you're on last year's USC defense, and they stopped playing you. Like, how?
I couldn't really find.
Maybe?
Yeah, I couldn't really find what the reason was because you go back the previous years, he was getting a couple hundred snaps a season and grading out very well in PFF. So I don't really know what the story was, but Fresno's excited about him, and so we'll see what those edges can do. At the very least, it's not nothing to test our tackles against. They're planning to rotate 7-8 deep at defensive line. They like this group a lot. They think their pass rush is pretty solid. Run defense was a question mark last year. The DTs in particular, Gabriel Lightfoot, defensive tackle last year, really struggled. He had an injury issue. If he's healthy, maybe they can hold up better, but it's a decent defensive line. I think at the very least we can learn some things about the offensive line. I think that's something we'll be watching quite a bit. It's the back seven where they really lost some big time pieces, and that's kind of the bummer. They had a good linebacker who was an All Mountain West player. He graduated, and they're plugging in another USC transfer in one of those spots who was named team captain, surprisingly, despite just transferring there. But and then the secondary, 2 returning starters, some guys they're excited about. I mean, this is a well-run program. They're mostly promoting from within outside of those transfer portal guys, but if this were last year's Fresno defense, then maybe you'd be more interested in that back seven, but there's probably some drop off here.
So, I mean, from Michigan's perspective, it's mostly about just seeing how cohesive your line is, how they go up against a team that they really should dominate physically in the trenches.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable take.
I mean, the same story as the other side of the ball, small. They don't have a defensive tackle who's 300 pounds. They do have one defensive. Devo Bridges is 253. He's a 6-year senior. That's about as big as they get. They got another guy, Jason Jackson, who played a little bit last year. But if they're going with my take on, I just blanked out his name again, the pass rusher from USC.
Corey Foreman.
Yeah, Corey Foreman. He's a pass rusher. And if they want to play against the run, and Michigan is probably not going to pass that much against this team, right? He's another person who's you're playing against his strengths. So they liked Gabriel Lightfoot when he was healthy last year, but that's because he could rush the passer. He's 299, 6'3", and not a, doesn't look like a planetary dude. Like he's just they're movable defensive tackles. And you mentioned they lost their linebacker who was making a lot of the plays last year when the defensive line, all they had to do was kind of get in the way and let him go and make the plays, and they don't have that playmaker. If they have one, it's the 6-year senior Malaki Langley, who had a pretty good sophomore season, then had a troublesome junior year. So there's some possibility he could, number 9 could be a little trouble for us. But that's basically it on defense that I had any respect.
All right, predictions. Alex?
31-14.
31-14. Wow. All right. Seth?
31-0.
Whoa.
They're not going to pay. They're not going to move the ball at all again. They're going to. You put our tackles out there, they're going to die. 31-0.
I'm going to go. Let's say 37-8. Get it rolling, guys. All right. Let's. What is the one thing that you most want to see in the opener, Alex?
Solid quarterback play. Quarterback play that doesn't make us want to jump out a window or something like that. That's my big hope.
Okay. Seth.
I also don't want to see Alex jump out of a window.
All right, we got to pick something else.
How about some Wink Martindale blitzes, just to get everybody excited? All right, you got 5 seconds, Brian. What's yours?
Miles Hinton wrecking fools and not falling over. Let's go.
Boris is a mayor and a land surveyor with plans of his own. He hates Aruska, he hates a vodka.